Welcome to Salesology, conversations with sales leaders, the art of faster, easier, more profitable sales. When you're ready to transform your sales for today's transforming market, we've got you covered with your host, the queen of cold calling and founder of Salesology, award-winning author, speaker, sales trainer, and coach, Wendy Weiss.
Hi, welcome to Salesology, conversations with sales leaders, the art of faster, easier, more profitable sales. And I'm your host, Wendy Weiss. I am the founder of Salesology and the Salesology Prospecting Method. I'm also known as the queen of cold calling. And today, I'm very excited about our guest today. We have Julie Hansen, who is the founder of Performance Sales Training. And Julie helps sales teams master the virtual selling stage and develops stronger buyer connections and engagement to drive sales. Julie is the author of 3 books, including Look Me in the Eye, Using Video to Build Relationships with Customers, Partners, and Teams. And that book was named one of the top sales books of 2021 by Top Sales World. And Julie is also the creator of the Selling on Video Masterclass. So in addition to an award-winning sales career, Julie worked as a professional actor, performing in over 75 plays, commercials, movies, and television shows, including HBO's Sex and the City, which was one of my all-time favorite shows. So I'm even more of a Julie Hansen fan now. And Julie currently performs at workshops and speaking engagements for sales organizations around the world. So welcome, Julie.
Thank you, Wendy. It's so great to be here with you.
Yeah. So I want to know the Julie Hansen story. Doesn't that sound like a made-for-TV movie?
Yeah,
Let's hear
the Lifetime movie.
The Lifetime movie. Let's give us the inside scoop. The Julie Hansen story.
Yes. Well, I can tell you how I got into this work and passion and life direction. I was working. I grew up in Denver, and I grew up, in the suburbs. And I always had this vision of, getting to New York and maybe doing some acting. And I thought that would be fun, but being very practical, I got into business and marketing. And so my first job was as a buyer. And, that was fine. But I noticed I dealt with all these salespeople, and they would come in and we would go out to lunch, and they just had such interesting lives, and I was stuck at my desk, and I thought, I want to do that. I could do that. And so I got into sales. And much to my surprise, it was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be.
Imagine that.
Yeah, imagine that. Because as a buyer, everybody calls you back. People are thrilled to hear from you. And, it wasn't quite the same in sales. And it really was a shock to my system. And I didn't know if I was going to make it. I'm sure my manager didn't think I was going to make it either. So I thought, I got to get past this fear of, rejection and talking to people I don't know. And so I remembered that I really liked acting. And so I started taking some acting classes, and lo and behold, that actually worked. That helped me sort of get out of myself and just develop more confidence and not take rejection so personally. And it just opened up the doors to a lot of different tools and skills that I use in my career I used in my career as a salesperson and as a manager, and then certainly in the training industry. So, that's kind of the full cycle where I'm at today.
Well, that's a very cool story. And I have to ask you, because our listeners may or may not know that my first career was I danced in a ballet company. I danced with Pittsburgh Ballet Theater, and then I danced with the Cincinnati Ballet. And I kind of believe that everything I know in life and business, I learned in ballet class. So I'm wondering, Julie, what did you learn concrete in acting class that transferred into your life and business today?
Oh my gosh, you're right. I learned so much there that filled in a lot of the gaps that all that logical sales training didn't necessarily address. And some of it was, there's a book out called The Experience Economy, which is written by two Harvard MBAs, and they really talk about performance or any type of sales being an act of theater or an act of performance. When you get in front of someone, there's an act of, there's a piece of performance to it. You can either acknowledge that or pretend it's not there, but it is. Like, you want to present the best of you. You don't want to turn into another person, but you want to be, show the best, how you can best meet that person's needs and form a relationship with them using the best parts of you. And so that's what I think you learn as a performer, is how to adapt to whatever you're given and whatever the circumstances are, and to use different parts of yourself. Because I think in business, a lot of times we get into, this, I have my business mode. And then when I'm different with my family, and, people always say, well, acting is phony. And it's like, no, it's not. You're really using different parts of yourself. I think we get really stuck in our roles in business. And a lot of times what I work with people on is breaking out of that business mold. Like, let's see some personality. Like, who are you? That's what connects you with other people. And that's what audiences want to see. That's what customers want to see. So how do we bring that to the sales conversation?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I have a colleague that talks about telephone theater when you're prospecting, when you're using the phone to prospect. And the definition of telephone theater, because you're right, so many people think, oh, I don't want to be phony. If you think about going to the theater or going to a really good movie or even watching a really good show on TV, it's like you're drawn into another world.
Right.
And
right.
that's what we are doing as a performer. You're drawing the audience into your world. And as a sales professional, you're drawing that prospect or client or customer into your world.
Yeah. And look, I a lot of people that say that, like, I don't want to be phony. It's like, well, show me the version of you that is, in a conversation with somebody you really like and you're talking about something passionate. I bet that's very different than the person that is, the authentic you that's sitting back, channel surfing on their couch, right? You have all these different people inside of you, these different shades of yourself. And that's all we want to do, is bring that heightened version of you to the conversation. That's where that connection can form. And it's especially important in this virtual world where we don't have that energy that transfers between people. And you've probably heard the saying, sales is a transfer of energy or a transfer of enthusiasm. And if there ain't any energy going back and forth, it's an uphill battle.
Absolutely. And so I'm curious how you teach that. I've been training people to use the phone for over 25 years. And one of the things, again, that I hear is, well, I don't want to be phony. I don't want to use this script because I'm going to be phony. To me, a script that means you're prepared. And right. Actors manage to use scripts and sound very lifelike. And news anchors on TV, they read the teleprompter and sound human. And so it's entirely possible. So how do you teach that? I'm just really curious.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And it comes up a lot. Well, the reason it sounds so natural is because actors aren't just getting it for the first time and then reading it. They have internalized it. It makes sense to them. They know why they're saying it. They know how they want to make the other person feel about what they're saying. So they're very connected to the words. Now, the beauty of a script in sales is the director isn't going to, zap you afterwards because you didn't say 2 words that they're the playwright wrote. So you have more flexibility, but you have to, it's both mental in terms and psychological in terms of like, well, okay, why am I saying this to a person? If you don't know why you're saying it, it's going to come out weird. If you don't know what you're hoping to, how you're hoping this other person feels about what you're saying, it's going to come out really flat. Things come out differently if I think I want to really motivate Wendy. I want to, come on, Wendy, let's, we got some great things going on. Like that's a very different feeling than it's like, I just want to tell Wendy what we're doing. So here's what we're doing, Wendy. We're going to do this, that's all. That isn't the words. That is what I add to it. And if you're not adding anything to the words, you're a dime a dozen, right? Anybody can read words, but you have to bring them to life. And whether you're on the phone or, in front of someone.
Or virtually.
Or
on a Zoom call.
For sure. Absolutely. So it's a matter of, kind of understanding what you're saying, and then also being able to get in that energetic place, which takes, and you certainly appreciate this as a performer, but I think most salespeople that don't have that background don't understand. You can't go from 0 to 100 in terms of getting your peak energy or where you need to be when they pick up the phone or they get on the call with you on Zoom. That doesn't happen as soon as the light goes on. Like you have to already be there, right? So you have to do that work to warm up and to be accessible and have, be expressive and high energy. That has to happen before, because what I see with most salespeople is, and you probably recognize this, it takes them about, 20 or 30 seconds to really get into, find their groove in the, a prospecting call or on a virtual call. And that's just too long today, right? I mean, people are, they're deciding very quickly whether they want to listen to you or how they feel about you and whether they trust you or like you. So you can't waste those first few seconds warming up on your audience.
Yeah, you've got a performance coming up. You don't just run out on stage as the curtain's coming up because you memorized your lines.
Right,
so
I'm sure you did some stuff backstage, right? I don't know that. And it's like actors. If you went backstage, like before an actor was going out, they're not just sitting there waiting for their, oh, I'm on. Oh, okay. They're like moving around. They're loosening up. They're vocalizing. They're trying to keep that energy flowing, because the combination of both sitting and waiting and nerves can really start to paralyze you and bring your energy down. And that's when you get that feeling that I had the first time I was on camera, like, what do I do with my hands? What do I usually do with my hands? All that strange out of body experience when you're not connected to your body.
Absolutely. I love what you're saying. And, I'm also curious because I know that so much has changed before COVID. Some people were doing some virtual video calls to clients and prospects. And now with COVID, like everybody's doing it. And so that was really a big change. And so I'm wondering what you see. I saw, I believe it was on LinkedIn, you had 6 myths of virtual selling. And I'm wondering, what are the myths? What are the things that people believe about virtual selling that are just not true?
Yeah, there's a lot of them. And I think what happened was when we went, some people certainly were virtually before, but I worked with a lot of those because I did presentation training. And even the ones that do virtual presentations, I was like, do you use your, how many of you use your camera? And they're like, oh, no. I even have tape over my camera just on the off chance that it might go on. It's like, okay. So it was a hard sell back then. But then when I saw everybody go on camera and I saw companies just, giving people the technology, like we've got a platform, get a camera, get lighting, go. And it's like, wait a minute, there's a little more to it, right? It was like when I started acting, which most actors start in the theater where it's a live audience. And then, after a couple of years, I had an audition for a little film. And I walked in there just doing the same thing I did in live theater. And they were like, whoa, what are you doing? It didn't work. And it doesn't work. And I didn't get any roles until I took some on-camera training to understand how to adjust to this medium. So these myths have persisted. And I think many started by people who've never had to make a living on camera, just figuring out themselves and figuring out what's comfortable for them instead of what works for your audience. And so one of the biggest one is because it's very difficult to make eye contact, because you have to look at the camera, and that's not natural. It's very counterintuitive, and there's a lot of things working against you. But there's a skill to that, and that's why I wrote the book. There's 2 chapters about it in the book. We just assume it should be easy, so we just dismiss it because it's not easy, and therefore it's stupid and it doesn't matter. Well, newsflash, it does matter because it's really ingrained in us as humans that if you are looking at me, you're interested in me, you are telling the truth, you're confident, you're likable. If you want to give all those qualities up as a salesperson, that's your choice, but that really puts you at a disadvantage. And the myth that people tell themselves, and that I hear all the time, is, well, my customer knows that I'm looking at their image on my screen. And I think, do they though? Do they think about it that much? I'm not sure that a prospect is going to make excuses for me as to why I'm not, they don't feel connected with me. So that's a myth that people are using to support a bad habit. And that's what a lot of them are. I hear also, put a mirror up by your, or look at your image to see if, to check and see if you're smiling. Which, can you imagine sitting across from a customer and like picking up a mirror and going, oh, and pasting on a smile? Like, no, that's, the time to do that work and to know what your face is saying and to, is before you get on that call, right?
And that is such a goofy myth, and it exists in the telephone prospecting world too.
Oh,
I can't count how many experts I have heard. Put a mirror by your phone so you can see yourself smiling.
It's so 1980s. It's like, come on. It's like, we all know, people can tell when it's a phony smile, both visually, and I think you can hear it. Like, it's not the same. And it's just, and all it does, especially if you look at yourself, instantly takes you out of the moment. You're focused on yourself. And most people don't look at themselves and go, oh yeah, I look great. No, we go into this, oh my God, what's going on with my hair? And oh, my smile. And so all you've done is you've just taken the focus away from your customer, your prospect, which is where it should be.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on why it is that people, human beings that are perfectly engaging in real life, when you put them in a sales position where they need to do telephone prospecting, or they need to do a presentation, or they need to do a video call, all of a sudden they turn into sales robots.
Right.
Hi,
yes.
Julie.
I have a couple theories about that. I think the biggest one is that, less so now, but I think many of us have grown up in a culture where we had this idea of what business mode was, like business mode. And it's very buttoned up and it's very neutral and very, kind of soothing, kind of, if you listen to NPR radio, kind of, that, that quality. And not that there's times where that quality isn't perfectly, successful or appropriate, but as a flat tone, that doesn't work. And we've separated our emotions from business is what we've done. And that's when you get flat like that, that's what it is for the most part. And then some people have a more monotone voice on top of that. So it just magnifies that dearth of emotion. So I always tell people, and this is really evident, I'm sure you hear it on, with your phone sellers, certainly in their voice, but it's really evident on camera too, because, I'll see a lot of salespeople and they'll say something, like, well, this is going to save you $1 million. And their face looks like the same as if they'd asked me to pass the salt. I'm like, so I would stop and say, is that good news or bad news? Because from your face, I have no idea, right? And it's the same thing with your voice. If I don't know how you feel about what you said from your face or from your voice, then you're just saying words, right? You're relying on the words to do all the work. And everybody, newsflash, everybody has good words today. I've got a lot of companies spending good money on writing good words, and a lot of them sound very much alike. So that's a dangerous thing, just to rely on the words that you're saying to carry the message.
Well, if you don't have the right tone, the words won't carry the message.
Right.
If you're going to save them $1 million,
right,
let's hear it in your voice.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing. Have you ever had someone apologize to you and they weren't sorry?
Yes.
It's the exact same words. It's like, I'm sorry. I think I used to do that to my mom all the time. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, we all did that to our mom. Yes.
In other words, I'm not sorry. Get off my back. As opposed to a genuine, I'm sorry. Same words. And that's true of, I'm going to save you this, or we're going to help you do this. Yeah, but if we don't know how you feel about what you're saying, then you're just spitting words.
Yeah. I love this conversation. We're going to pause here for a moment for a word from our sponsor. When we come back, I want to ask you about using video, selling online, the difference between face-to-face and being on video, and also how to build trust when you're on video. So I have a lot of questions for
you.
So
I'll be ready.
We are coming back. Now, we have a word from our sponsor, Salesology 3X Appointments. You know how frustrating and stressful it is when you leave every sales meeting wondering if your sales team knows how to sell, because they're not selling and all you ever hear from them are excuses. They blame your marketing, they say you need to do more social media, and they say you need a new website. You know something's wrong, you don't quite know what it is, and you're even starting to wonder if it's you. You don't have a lot of options. You could just fire them all and start from scratch. That would be expensive, and you're really sick of waking up in the middle of the night wondering how to fix this. Well, imagine instead that you have an easy-to-use, replicable system that ensures your team can easily schedule qualified appointments. And imagine that your team is excited and motivated. No more excuses, and you feel good. Salesology 3X Appointments can make that happen. If you're a business owner or a sales manager with an underperforming sales team, let's talk. Click on the link to my calendar in the show notes, schedule a time, and I look forward to meeting you. And we are back with Julie Hansen. She is the founder of Performance Sales Training. So welcome back, Julie.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, because I think this might have been one of your myths too, the difference between being face-to-face with someone and then being on camera, video calls with a prospect.
Right. So the myth is that it's the same thing. Like, you don't have to change anything. And which is ridiculous. It's an entirely new medium, right? And people experience you very differently on their screen. You probably heard the expression, the camera adds 10 pounds.
Yes. As a dancer, I have heard that.
Right. And there's some truth to that, because that's one of the distortions that happens because it flattens things out, right? And the camera distorts certain things, it magnifies other things, it misses some things entirely, and it also takes away a big chunk of your energy, because we don't have that natural transfer of energy, whatever that happens when people are in the room together, and you can feel it, especially after not being around that for a while and people are back in person. They're like, wow, this is great. Yeah, that's that chunk that's missing. So if you don't adjust for those things that are happening, just by the fact that you're on camera, then you are really at a disadvantage, because you're not coming across as effectively I always ask people, do you think you do you think you're the same trustworthy, confident person, on camera as you are in person? They're like, yeah, sure, of course. And, you don't turn into another person, but do you think you're perceived as the same trustworthy, confident, credible person on video as you are in person? And that often gives people pause because they really don't know. And it's important to know. And most people are not, because they are not adapting to this medium and leaving themselves open for people to go, I don't know, there was just something I just didn't trust them that much, or I didn't feel like they really believed in their solution.
So what are those adaptations? What does someone, a sales professional that wants to be seen as trustworthy on camera, what are some tweaks they can make to start that process?
Yeah, and there's a few of them. There's the first thing is looking at the camera. I mean, that's the biggest thing you can do to build credibility and to build relationships is through eye contact. So, and knowing how much eye contact to make, when to make eye contact is really something, it's a lot of understanding how people perceive you and when they want to feel heard and seen, and adjusting to that. And also avoiding things like, I see a lot of people who look at the camera, then they look down, they look at the camera, and they're down, and they're all over the place. They get the shifty eyes, right? Which is not associated with anything positive we want to convey to our audience. So managing that is a big thing. And that's not a small thing to do. There's a lot, of technique behind that. And then there is also this problem that happens virtually, which is, I don't know if you've seen this, but people tend to talk too much on virtual calls because they don't like the silence, because it's awkward. You don't know if the other person is listening, if they heard you, if they're going to fill it, that space where we used to, see someone thinking about answering our question. We don't see that just because of the dynamics, or there's too many people on the call. And so salespeople will just go in and they'll rush in and answer their own questions. They'll, I see a lot of people just talking these long monologues because they don't want to risk that dead air because it's so uncomfortable. And so people don't get heard as much. Customers don't get a voice. And that's another thing that was found to build trust is listening, is that active listening. And so listening virtually is really an art, and it takes some confidence to do that. It's especially difficult when your customer isn't on video. And that sends a lot of sellers into a panic, and they just keep talking because you have no idea if something's landed. And talking to a camera when you can't see someone else is as close to acting as most people are ever going to get. It is acting. And yes. So there are skills to talk to a camera when you can't see another person, but they are there, that make it sound very natural and take away some of your fear. And one of those is just, you have to assume the other person is interested, because if I assume you're sitting back there judging me, and that's what a lot of salespeople that, I've had a lot of conversations with sellers over the last couple of years. It's like, well, I just know they're probably, listening to me, or they're unhappy, or they're, and like, why would you say, why would that be the case? If they were sitting across from you, would you imagine you said something interesting? Don't you think they'd be interested? You said something funny. Do you think they'd laugh? Those things are still happening, even though you can't see them, right? And if you project the best possible reaction to whatever you've said, it brings out the best in you, and it likely brings out the best in your audience as well. There's no upside to going, oh, I bet they hate this. Oh my God, they're bored. All that does is make you want to rush and keep talking.
Yeah, that just makes you screw up. So I'm curious if you think there's a difference between speaking with prospects over the phone or speaking with customers over the phone versus talking to the camera when your prospect or customer is not on camera? Is that similar or is that different?
It's different. The vocal quality is still very important, but it's different because as a seller, even if your customer isn't on camera, you should have your camera on because they get all the benefit of seeing you and feeling like they're talking to a real person. So anything we can do to, give ourselves more substance and, make it a tactile experience as close as possible is really positive. You're using more senses. So that's the thing, certainly on the phone, you don't have to be as aware of looking in a certain spot and your body language. But it's the similar as far as that silence and trusting that space, giving that customer space to communicate with you is very similar. Yes.
And what about not looking like you just got out of bed?
Yes, very important. Right? Well, if you think about it, it's like, I always repeat, would you show up in your prospect's office like that? That's really the bottom line. If you wouldn't do it in person, why are you doing it on video? And I think that some of the good behaviors that we may have started with have laxed a bit, is what I'm hearing from a lot of managers. And getting a little comfy. And I have to say, comfy is the enemy of great communication, right? Because nothing, when you get comfy, you sit back. And of course, when you sit back virtually, it looks like you're not that interested. You're laid back and your energy goes down. You're already seated. So that's a low energy position. Your voice gets really, monotone and low energy. And it is, you're not conveying energy. You're not giving your customer anything to build on. You're not building that relationship. You really have to bring more energy virtually, and I think on the phone, than you do when you're in person, because you don't have that in-person piece to help you.
Yeah, the in-person thing, it gives you energy back.
Right. So you have to create your own, and you have to sustain it, and you have to, and I had a TV announcer tell me this one time. She said, you have to bring enough energy for you and the other person.
Yes.
That's how much energy you have to bring. So most people, and that's one of those myths, that you just can show up the same as you do in person. Well, you can't, because that doesn't communicate through the technology as effectively. You will look like a less dynamic person than you are in person. That's how you will come across. And it's really important to get that energy up. And of course, there's lots of ways, I'm sure you learned as a dancer, and lots of ways I learned as an actor to get to that peak energy level. And to get there, oftentimes I work with people to do an exercise where I have them just go over the top, just go bigger than you think you would ever talk to a customer, like gesture and shout and jump up and down. And they're like, oh, this is crazy. It's like, yeah, it is crazy. So now you've found like your upper limit, right? Now do it again. Just do it again. And they find like their energy is naturally up. It's very engaging. It's higher than they would have been, if they just stayed in that same level. We almost never test our comfort level, our comfort zone, right? We just operate in that very narrow window, which is not very compelling or engaging. It doesn't have much energy to transfer. And so stretching that comfort zone is really important.
Yeah, I was listening to, and I cannot remember which internet marketer it was, but he was talking about doing webinars. And he said that when you are presenting on a webinar, you have to be over the top.
Mm-hmm.
And because otherwise it just doesn't translate. And I think it's actually very similar on the phone or when you're on camera. You may not navigate through life at that peak, at that level.
Right.
But to just burst through that screen so that people can see you and hear you and get what you have to say, it takes sometimes that extra push.
Yeah. And the thing is, we are not good judges of ourselves in terms of how other people see us on their screen, because we don't see their screen. And so we don't experience ourselves the same way. And so you need to have a very strict guideline of what you're looking for when you do review your recordings, so you can put yourself in your customer's shoes or work with someone who can help give you that feedback. Because I remember when I first started acting on camera, and I was doing a little scene with somebody was supposed to be my love interest, and the director stopped me and he said, you don't even seem like you really like this guy. It's like, and I really thought I was just going to town. I was like doing my best. And I argued with him, which you're never supposed to argue with the director. But he said, okay, do it again. And he recorded me in rehearsals. And then he goes, okay, come over and look at this. And I looked at it and I was like, oh my God, he's right. Like, I didn't look happy. I didn't have, much energy. And so I realized, like, it doesn't matter what you think you're doing. All that matters is what the camera sees. You say in film, if the camera doesn't see it, it doesn't exist. It doesn't care what you were thinking you were doing. So you have to deal with that harsh reality. And if you don't know where you're at, then that's a tough place to start. That's where we all have to begin to see what we're working with, our baseline, and then how we improve that.
Yes. So I know, Julie, you have a gift for all of our listeners.
I do. So as we talked about, trust is one of the most difficult things to build virtually. In fact, Harvard Business Review found it's just really more difficult to build relationships virtually, and trust is a big part of relationships. So I put together a guide, the top 10 credibility crushers on video, and then the top 10 corresponding trust building behaviors for things that you can do to add that, to convey trustworthiness to your audience. Because a lot of the traditional trust building methods, like really, being empathetic, listening to someone, all these things won't work if they don't perceive that you're empathetic and credible and trustworthy on video. So it's 10 tips for you to put to use right away.
Okay, and we are going to post that link in the show notes. So as soon as you finish listening to this podcast, go to the show notes, click on the link, and download Julie's gift. And I know I'm going to do that as soon as we finish this interview. And
awesome.
So Julie, where can people find you?
You can find me at juliehansen.live. And got lots of articles on everything we discussed and videos. And also on LinkedIn, Julie Hansen Sales Training. And of course, my book is on Amazon, Look Me in the Eye. And I'd love to connect with you if you found any of this helpful or had any questions we didn't answer. It's a big subject. So
it is a big subject. That actually leads me to my next question. But before I ask it, I'm going to say that we're going to post all of those links in the show notes. So all you have to do is finish listening to this podcast and then click on them in the show notes. And so my last question for you, Julie Hansen, because this has been such a valuable conversation, would you put your hand over your heart and promise me that you will come back so that we can continue the conversation?
I would, and I will. Absolutely. I would be delighted to.
Okay, wonderful. And so today, you have been listening to Salesology Conversations with Sales Leaders. And my special guest has been Julie Hansen, who is the founder of Performance Sales Training. And if you found value in today's podcast and listening to today's podcast, think about one business owner or one sales leader or sales professional that that you think would find value in today's podcast and share the link with them. And till we meet again, visualize yourself surrounded by cash, really large bills.
You've been listening to Salesology, Conversations with Sales Leaders, the art of faster, easier, more profitable sales. Be sure to follow so that you don't miss a single episode. And while you're at it, please leave a rating and review, and be sure to share it with your friends. Tune in every week for more exciting insights and wisdom on transforming sales. And until next time, visualize yourself surrounded by cash, very large bills.